Arise now, Etienne.
In search of the Elden
Become the Elden Lord.
Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you're doing well. So if you didn't already know, Elden Ring is officially getting its own movie. Even more, Bandai Namco and A24 of all companies are collaborating to make this happen. And sitting at the helm is Alex Garland, who will be writing and directing this project. Now I'm a big fan of Alex Garland's work, so I'm quite intrigued to see how he'll handle the adaptation. But here's the multi-million-dollar question right now. What story will the film follow? Assuming you've played the game or even watched extensive lore videos on it, you would know that there are countless stories to be told within Elden Ring's world. So what I want to do is speculate and possibly narrow down a very probable plot that the film could tell. Though before we really explore the various stories, let's try to clear some logistical details. A24 is a much bigger company nowadays as compared to a couple years ago. It's often been labeled as the mainstream indie studio, and I can agree with that. Looking on Google, Civil War, ironically also written and directed by Alex Garland, is A24's most expensive film to date with a budget of $50 million. However, there was a report from Deadline stating that upcoming films Marty Supreme and The Smashing Machine have budgets of $70 million, which would then make these films A24's most expensive. So from this we can see how far A24 is pushing in terms of budget. Obviously with a project like Elden Ring, they're going to have to raise their bar much higher to capture the medieval fantasy elements that this film demands. Since this is also a collaboration with Bandai Namco, the other factor is how much Bandai is willing to put into the pot. Are they going to match what A24 is putting up? I don't know. Are they going to just cover all marketing expenses? Because remember that marketing a film can range from 50 to 150% of its budget. So who's to say? These are just some of the questions I wondered about when researching this, but for all intents and purposes, let's say A24 and Bandai reach an agreed upon conservative budget of $130 to $150 million. Remember, A24 has money, but they're no Disney, Sony, or Warner Bros. And listen, I could be completely off base in my estimations, but let's just have some number to work off of. In terms of tone and atmosphere, looking at A24's catalog, their closest film to Elden Ring is The Green Knight. This was a medieval drama starring Dev Patel with many fantasy elements, but it solely followed a tragic protagonist throughout their journey. Besides a decapitation, there was little to no action and the film landed on a budget of $15 million. And looking through Garland's work, the closest thing I could recall is Annihilation, which falls more into the sci-fi horror genre. Following a group of scientists, the film focuses on how a mysterious zone, expanding across the American coastline, bends the laws of nature as we know it. Its budget landed somewhere between $40 to $50 million, but its concepts and visuals are what really made this film unique, and I could possibly see some relation with Elden Ring's cryptic lore. So where am I going with all this? Well, my train of thought is let's look back at the closest things A24 and Alex Garland have done that resemble anything close to Elden Ring, and maybe we can gain some kind of idea in the direction they could take. For example, a common and popular shared trope or thread is the tragic protagonist and the use of horror. And speaking of the latter, A24 has made such a name for themselves just in that genre. I'm not going to list all their titles, but some of their biggest hits include Hereditary, Talk to Me, The Witch, Midsummer, X, and Tusk. And let's throw in some notable horror titles Alex Garland has worked on. 28 days later, Annihilation, Men, and 28 years later. On the tragic protagonist end, we can also see some heavy hitters from A24, as seen here. And taking a closer look, we can see one of Garland's greatest hits, that being Ex Machina on this list. Alright, so at this point you may be wondering, Kenny, where are you going with this? Well, think about it. A tragic protagonist in a film incorporating elements of horror that can introduce a wide audience into the world of Elden Ring on a rather conservative budget. Why not focus on the mascot that everyone's seen on the very cover of Elden Ring? Vyke. Also known as Vyke the Dragon Spear, Roundtable Knight Vyke, and Festering Fingerprint Vyke. Personally, I believe his story would be great to see on screen, as it tells a very human story with strong themes of sacrifice, love and/or loyalty, and loss. I won't go through the entire lore regarding Vyke, since this video would likely be 3 times as long, and there are already some fantastic videos out there delving into all the minute details of Vyke's history. But to put things briefly, before you're tarnished, as in the character you create to embark on this journey to becoming Elden Lord, Vyke was the closest tarnished to ever reach that goal. He was the only one recalled to ever hold 2 great runes together.
Only once before have I seen 2 great runes together.
But without announcement, he one day vanished when the world needed him most. No, but seriously, he one day vanished and traveled far below the capital city of Lindell, where he was scorched by the Flame of Frenzy, which is essentially the embodiment of chaos itself. Now, why did he do this, you ask? It's theorized that on his journey to becoming Elden Lord, he discovered he would have to sacrifice his Finger Maiden, a faction which served and aided the Tarnished on their journey. Not wanting to sacrifice his maiden, he looked for some other option, which is where he was most likely lured by a mysterious force known as the Flame of Frenzy. What he didn't realize was that communing with the Flame of Frenzy was a sacrilegious act by the Finger Maidens, and was what drove Vyke's own maiden to kill herself. So after setting aside his journey of becoming Elden Lord to save his maiden, it seemed that his own desperation was the very thing that ended up killing the person he tried so hard to save. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that would be such a dope story to see unfold. There's stakes, emotion, a character you can root for, and a perilous journey with so many opportunities to build tension. It's parts Shakespearean, parts Greek tragedy, a dash of Dark Souls 1 Artorias, and a sprinkle of the downfall of Star Wars' Anakin. And all of this is being unveiled to us while we travel across the lands between with Vyke, while possibly getting bits and pieces of extra demigod lore as a B story. I mean, come on. I paid full admission price to see that. If for some reason Vyke's story doesn't make the cut, I've also created a tier list of most likely to not likely stories that could be told. I tried to keep this more objective given the research, but if you think any of these should be moved around, then do let me know. So, for this list, I've included the following storylines: Vyke's journey, the Tarnished journey, Ranni's journey of killing Godwyn, the Shattering, Godwyn's war against the giants and dragons, the Badlands, Mesmer's war, and Mikla's attempt at reaching godhood. To get one big point out of the way, you may be wondering why stories pertaining to great wars are an unlikely candidate, and it's because of 2 things: budget and writing. A war in Elden Ring's world is not going to be cheap and would require something on the scale of the battles we've seen in movies like Lord of the Rings. And on the other hand, I did a deep dive into Garland's filmography, and throughout his whole career, his stories focus on smaller scale stories. Even with his recent lore-based films, their stories are not on the scale of big epics. Garland creating a big epic seems very out of place for his style of writing, and will be quite the risk after sticking with the approach he's kept for over a decade. Not to mention, none of his films have broken the 2-hour runtime mark, so I feel he wouldn't want to bite off more than he can chew. This is on top of the fact that there's no mention that this film is part of a trilogy, which means we should expect this to be a one and done situation. Now, aside from this, I feel though cool to explore, I don't see much appeal to having a whole movie dedicated to Mikla's journey or Hoarlu's journey into the Badlands. I could see these as being mentioned by other characters, but nothing to warrant an entire film about, which then leaves the last two contenders, Ranni's journey and the Tarnished journey. Regarding Ranni, I wouldn't see a retelling of her questline you follow in the game, but rather her story of breaking from the greater will, learning from her mentor, and plotting with Blaidd and Iji to ultimately conclude with Gawain's death on the Night of the Black Knives. And with the Tarnished journey, I could see an altered version of the journey you take in the base game, just to give us something familiar yet different than what we already know. That would probably have massive appeal while keeping things relatively safe. It wouldn't be my personal choice, but it's a safer choice for the bigger parties involved. Regardless of what story Alex Garland and A24 decide to go with, can we just acknowledge how strange it is that Elden Ring is even getting a movie? It's definitely something I never would have guessed, but it's crazy that it's happening, especially through a collaboration between an indie studio and a AAA gaming company. All I can say is that I hope it's a faithful adaptation and that the story is tight. Knowing it's A24, I expect story to be a priority, and I hope Alex Garland can deliver in terms of depth, character development, and combat reminiscent to the game. I'm talking backstab, spells, and incantations. And one last thing, and this is something I personally want to see. It doesn't even need to have a whole plot or a significant scene, but I think it would be criminal that a FromSoft game is being made into the film, and we as fans don't at the very least get a glimpse of the Moonlight Greatsword on screen. Like, that needs to happen. But I digress. Let's just keep our fingers crossed and pray to the gods that this film delivers on all fronts.